That's right, another Pokemon Switch video. You're welcome. Or, I'm sorry. I talk about Pokemon a lot here. We all know this. I'm very clearly very excited for Pokemon on the Switch. I've been waiting literal decades, since the days of Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64, for a real Pokemon home console game. Plus, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited for a real reason to retire my dinosaur of a handheld, the Nintendo 3DS.
AJ, what the hell? I thought we talked about this. Where do you get off besmirching my beloved 3DS? What did the 3DS ever do to you? This thing is super portable, it's very affordable, it has a massive library including Pokemon games of a whole bunch of different generations. You, of all people, a Pokemon fan, should love this thing.
Yeah, whatever, Izzy. Point still stands. A Pokemon game on console would be incredible. 3DS had one more gem to offer the Pokemon franchise by way of Detective Pikachu, and I think that game could be a really interesting source of inspiration for Pokemon on Nintendo Switch. At most, it can make the games on console feel like the grand experiences the biggest franchise in the world deserves, or at the very least, it could change up some conventions that have, in my opinion, very much so overstayed their welcome. One weak point the Pokemon franchise has at face value is its storytelling. From most people's perspective, Pokemon's story is largely the same, being the classic, you're a new trainer, you need to collect the 8 badges, all the Pokemon, and thwart the evil plans of some crime syndicate comprised of one-note baddies that seek to take over the world in one way or another. This formula has worked for a long time, but as I'm sure many people on this channel know by now, I don't think that just because something is currently working that's good enough justification to use it over and over and over again. For instance, I ate breakfast, I digested it, it was a successful meal, I was full. Does that mean I want to eat it again and again and again? No. There are very few people that truly care about the story. The diehard fans, competitive players, rush through it to get to the current meat of the series, the competitive scene. And casual fans passively consume the story. That to me presents a clear path for growth for the Pokemon franchise on Switch. A path that Pokemon Company, and more specifically Creatures Inc., the devs behind Detective Pikachu, the Poke Park games, and a few other spin-offs. I think there's a lot to learn from these games, specifically Detective Pikachu, that can be injected into the mainline games on Switch. Making the story more fleshed out is the most important obvious point of inspiration to glean from Detective Pikachu. There is so much personality in that game. The characters in Sun and Moon are headed in the right direction when it comes to how they emote, and on a basic level, Team Skull was a refreshing change, being obvious tryhards rather than a truly imposing crime syndicate. That was kinda dampened by the Aether Foundation, but I think the nuance with that group in the end narrowly saves them from being another cliche. But even with all of that in mind, they're no comparison for what Detective Pikachu achieves in that department. These teams in the current mainline games end up boiling down to 3 main personality types: the evil mastermind, the troubled youth, and the mindless grunts. Detective Pikachu doesn't exactly have Oscar-worthy characters, but it at the very least has a fair amount of interesting support elements to set it apart from the current status quo. The Apom in the first case of Detective Pikachu, for instance, have more personality than all Team Grunts in past Pokemon games combined. Making antagonists, and more importantly protagonists, interesting can do a lot for a story, and I think making the story about more than just the typical bad guy gang and beating the Elite Four by way of interactions with interesting Pokemon and human characters along the way is a great way to grow the main series from what Detective Pikachu does right. Another weak point of mainline Pokemon games is keeping the experience of the story varied, something I feel could be done naturally in the Pokemon world, a world that prides itself on being about more than just Pokemon battles. I've talked a lot in past videos, all of which I'll link in the card up here. Also, we'll always have more, so subscribe for that. About the choice of what your specific role as a participant in this world should be. The world is so vast and varied with all kinds of occupations and possible relationships that can be had with Pokemon. Why not provide the possibility to specialize in them, even if that means in a simplified way? Maybe if I specialize in being a breeder, I'm given the ability to craft potions, status healing items, and even rare candies out of berry recipes.
Don't forget, Ash, I've been studying to be the world's best Pokemon breeder. You'll be just fine. This'll sting a little, but it'll make your wound heal faster, I promise.
Or if I specialize as a villain, I'm given the ability to steal Pokemon from an NPC. And if they really want to go all out, allow players to specialize as cops and chase the players that are the villains down. Being a detective in the Pokemon world was a nice change of pace. I think being able to do a version of that with other professions in the mainline games would take them to the next level. There's some interesting challenges in Detective Pikachu that aren't just a line of battles you have to do, basic puzzles, and fetch quests. That's not to say those things don't exist in this game, with the exception of battles, obviously. Nonetheless, I think the increased amount of things you can do in that game would be a nice change for the mainline Pokemon games. It would make them feel more premium on console. They've also started to toy around with the idea of cutscenes, not only in this game, but in the 3DS generation of the mainline games. Pokemon is a big enough series to warrant voice acting at this point in these segments. And beyond that, I think it's time to give the Pokemon voices in these games over the robotic sound effects we're accustomed to right now. Like many other things, there's people that are attached to this approach to Pokemon Cry, so I think they should provide the option to revert Pokemon to that primitive sound effect approach. Some people hate change, so I'm not opposed to allowing them to choose where to accept progress where possible. The feel of the worlds in these spin-off games is also a big advantage they have over the current Pokemon games. There's a lot more personality there, and that goes double for the Pokemon themselves. Detective Pikachu himself being the biggest example of this. Now obviously not every Pokemon could or even should be given the same level of personality, but I think there should be a portion of them that are given that. What if you had a Pokemon capture story similar to Ash and his Squirtle? We've seen Pokemon hordes already. What if there was a Pokemon in that group that was clearly their leader or an outcast? What if some of the Pokemon have visible accessories similar to the sunglasses worn by the Squirtle squad? Or physical differences like the tuft of hair that differentiated Richie's Pikachu from Ash's in the anime? Differences like this could be pretty easy to implement in the grand scheme of things, especially if they use a pre-existing system to determine which Pokemon have these unique qualities and backstories. Maybe Pokemon with 4 perfect IVs or better get thrown into a randomizer to determine what qualities they have and what prescriptive backgrounds they have. I currently have a few memorable captures that are connected to shinies. You remember stuff like that when the Pokemon is special in one way or another. Introducing Pokemon with unique traits that aren't as rare, or varying degrees of personality, or any other notable visual quirk I feel would increase stories like my first shiny capture or the first time I hatched a 6 IV Pokemon. Or something Game Freak toyed with in Pokemon Yellow, or to a lesser degree Heart Gold and Soul Silver. A Pokemon's friendliness towards you affecting their body language and battle would be a great touch that would no doubt immerse people further into the world and make the advertised bond between Pokemon and trainer that much more palpable. Affection is a step in the right direction for this. Your Pokemon gains experience faster, powers through status affliction, and otherwise fatal attacks, as well as dodging attacks completely disregarding a move's accuracy. Pokemon even turn to the trainer looking for positive reinforcement when they do some of these things. Pokemon and Me is proof that Game Freak doesn't mind going the extra mile and animating unique interactions with each Pokemon. Taking Pokemon and Me to the next level, I feel would make a lot of fans of the series happy. Everybody has been clamoring for the ability to have a Pokemon follow them around. Imagine being able to set up camp and sending out your Pokemon to rest up while traveling through a forest. Making Pokemon and Me into a deeper mechanic that ropes in a user-friendly alternative to EV training, I feel would be a good usage case for that mode as well. The mini games that are currently in the Pokemon games are tedious and aren't really related to the task at hand most times. They could task other studios that have worked on Pokemon games in the past, like Creatures Inc., or even reach out to HAL to create better mini games for improving a Pokemon's speed, attack, defense, HP, and special stats. These can be optional, of course, just like the current super training is. This system doesn't have to be the most effective way to EV train either. The goal with this should be increasing the fun factor of this process. Let the hardcore guys stick to the SOS battles and using the macho braces and all that stuff. As I've said, Detective Pikachu and the supporting cast of other Pokemon in that game have a ton of charm and personality. That's rare to see in the current mainline games. Even the player character lacks personality. How cool would it be if Pokemon natures and characteristics were visually apparent? A bold Pokemon being more aggressive in the wild, a sassy Pokemon having its body language reflect that trait, or a timid Pokemon being more likely to use defensive moves or even flee. The same should be be true for characteristics. They don't necessarily have to influence stats or battle behavior in this case. Animations that demonstrate their characteristic would be a great way to take that mechanic to the next level. Not only would making these changes inject more life into the Pokemon we encounter and train, it would also make hardcore players' lives easier, killing two birds with one stone, giving more casual fans of the world and lore more to enjoy and geek out over, while simultaneously making people's road to being VGC champs less tedious, if they choose to partake at least. Can't think of even one logical reason to want to not know what your Pokemon's IVs are before you catch them. I think approaching those attributes in this way, as well as the relatively unique wild Pokemon, would even make the most stubborn diehards in the world happy. This would make the process of finding the perfect Pokemon less of a churn and burn kind of ordeal, and more of a hunt for a Pokemon that stands out. I don't see it as rewarding to catch a bunch of duds, filling up my boxes, and having to go through the tedious process of wonder trading or releasing everything that doesn't line up with my ideal version of a Pokemon. Making it visually communicative what Pokemon are primed for competitive play immediately can also bolster that community. A lot of players are turned off by the antiquated, unnecessarily obtuse process of catching and breeding and training a competitive ready Pokemon. Making that foundation easier to get in the wild, I feel, would turn a ton of people onto that scene. Keep in mind, I say all of this from the perspective of someone that enjoys the more hardcore aspects of Pokemon, but also loves the world and lore arguably more than the competitive scene. Sue me, I like things to evolve every once in a while. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Did you enjoy Detective Pikachu? Are there any other Pokemon spin-off games that you think could be put to better use as part of the bigger picture? Let me know in the comments. Also, I want to thank Izzy for contributing his rant about the ancient, nearly extinct relic that is Nintendo 3DS. Subscribe to his channel, linked in the description. And subscribe to this channel, like and share this video with a friend that likes Pokemon and wants to see it grow in scope. Make sure to ring the bell so you know when new videos like this go up every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If you like podcasts, we have those too, every Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, that's it for me. Well, actually, no, that's not it for me. I uploaded a review video of Penny Punching Princess that went up at the embargo, so you might have not been up when it went up. If you want to watch that, click the link somewhere on the screen. Okay, that's really it for me. See you next week.